Well, here we are again, folks, and we're talking today in Tidbits from the Word about some Jesus and his disciples. There was Jesus, and then he had Andrew, and then Peter, and then James, and then John. And James and John, Peter and Andrew, remember, were brothers, and James and John were brothers, and they were the sons of Zebedee. They were on that boat, mending nets. Jesus came along, said, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." And these were two men that immediately left their father Zebedee, walked off from the boat, got behind Jesus, and never turned back. And they followed Jesus to the end. Now this John we're talking about here was the son of this brother who I had a little bit of a spirited, perhaps a little temper maybe, but he was a spirited type of fellow. And John was much younger. And John had a meek spirit. And he wasn't the spokesman in one sense of the word that his brother was, the way that he was a spokesman. Now John is a spokesman. John is a writer of the book of Revelation. Now this John that Jesus loved, this is the John that Jesus entrusted his mother to. This is the John, the disciple, that said many times, the one that loved Jesus. This is the John that laid his head on the breast of Jesus and proved that he loved him. This is the John that followed Jesus to the grave, that sat he was the only disciple at the foot of the cross. This is the John that Jesus said, Peter, James, and John, you go with me. I'm going out to the mount of and pray. I got to go pray to the garden. He went to the garden on mountain and Mount Olive. He went to the garden to pray in Gethsemane. And as he was there praying, he took Peter, James, and John. By the way, Peter, James, and John went to sleep while he prayed. I think there's a good picture there. I think there's a picture there that God wanted. And then Jesus, I know he came over and woke them up. And he said, "Could you not have watched 1 hour?" Well, they were in the flesh. And I think the picture for you and I here was for you and I. And that's it. In the flesh, you can't do anything. You can't even stay awake in the flesh. The flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. And these boys weren't in the spirit yet. They went with Jesus up there. Jesus was praying in the spirit. These boys really didn't know anything about being indwelt yet. They weren't indwelt. Jesus hadn't gone to the cross yet. Now when Jesus went to the cross, and then he left the Holy Spirit, Acts 1:8, he said, "You will be endued with power. And then you will be witness unto me in Jerusalem, Judea, and the outermost parts of the world." And they were. And John here was such a great witness that he got to write and put his name in the book here and write a book after him. And so here we go again, back to the plan that God had. The plan that God had was that men after the cross would not serve Jesus, God, in the flesh. We would serve him in the flesh, but not by the flesh. Now, I serve God in this flesh, and I serve him daily by the Holy Spirit that is indwelt in me. But I don't serve him by my flesh. I serve him with my flesh being used by the Holy Spirit. Now, the Holy Spirit says, be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, tongue, what you say. Be careful, eyes, what you see. Be careful, feet, where you walk. Be careful what you do. It's the Holy Spirit talking to you in this body. Careful what you do with your body, because your body is Jesus, the temple now of Jesus Christ. All right, John and his brother James, they received their call to serve Jesus as they mended their nets on the fishing boat, and their response to that call was immediately. They left their father Zebedee in the boat, and with the men he employed, they followed him. He spent the rest of their lives as fishers of men. Now they spent the rest of their lives as fishers of men. Now John refers to him in his gospel as a disciple whom Jesus loved. There are a number of indications bearing out John's claim. Jesus said at different times that he loved him, and the Master held him in special esteem. But perhaps the strongest evidence of the incident that occurred on Calvary, when Jesus said, "John, behold thy mother, mother, behold thy son," and he gave into John's hand the committal of his mother. How many of you would commit your mother to your best friend and say, "I know they won't put her in a nursing home," or "I know they won't do this or that they'll take care of her"? Well, Jesus knew that about John, that he would take care of her. Now, John was that third party in that special group of Peter, James, and John. By the way, John was most of the time mentioned at the last of the end, and it probably was because he was the youngest in the group, as near as we can tell. Now, he permitted them to go, and John to go with him to the home of Jairus. Now, Jesus called Peter, James, and John to go into the home of Jairus. Now, y'all remember who he was. Jairus was the man that had the child that was raised from the dead. Well, at the transfiguration of Jesus, Jesus chose these three again to the mountain. He had them at the garden with him, and then he took them to the Mount of Transfiguration with him. And he took Peter, James, and John, and this was at Gethsemane, now where this took place, when he went to pray, and he bade other disciples to stay some distance away. He told other disciples, you stay back here. I'm going to take these three, and I'm going to go up there and do something. You remember now, Peter had great, enthusiasm and had great power. Peter was a man of power. Peter was going to be a man used of Jesus later on. When Peter walked by a man, he said, "Hey, fellow, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee, take up thy bed and walk." And the guy did. And this saw a little bit of recording in the Bible. It's a little bit odd that people like to, for instance, get a piece of Peter's clothing or something and snatch it away or whatever. And they said that Peter had so much power it rubbed off on the clothes. And Jesus was one of those, John, was in one of those special groups of disciples who the three were there all the time. So they went to Jairus' home together, and Jesus raised him. They were at the Mount of Transfiguration together. They were in the Garden of Gethsemane together. They had other disciples to stay some distance. All right, after Pentecost now, John worked closely with Peter in preaching. Now, John is going to work closely with Peter for about 3 years, 2 or 3 years in preaching and whatever, before he gets out on his own ministry. And it's important, after you get saved, if you're a young Christian, that you find another Christian or another man that can lead you, guide you, help you, and help you grow a root. Now, my man was Brother Ralph Taylor. He's on WOAK every day at 12:15 on WOAK.com on the radio for about 45 minutes. He's the man that put the root in me. And that root is held strong through the wind and the storms that we've come through. Now, after Pentecost, John preached with Peter Christ's message. And later on, Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, state that the outstanding Christian leaders in Jerusalem were Peter, James, and John. Paul stating this. And the early tradition said that John was in Jerusalem. John went to Ephesus and preached at Ephesus. Now, I have some historian books that claim that was so, and but the Bible doesn't necessarily say that that was so. But we do know that he was in Rome for a while, We do know